We are live. Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. I'm here with the coach, John Brent.
Man, I'm here with the vet, Mr. Ian Griffin. I can't wait for this one. It's going to be a great one.
It is, man. And we got some guests tonight, and I'll introduce them both, Coach. First one I'm going to introduce is, you already know him, Ira Baldwin, who was here 2 weeks ago. Ira, it's good to have you back on here, man.
Good to be back on, and good to see you all. And we're all here in great health and ready to rock and roll.
I'm going to throw this up and let you tell us a little bit about this real quick.
Great. Yes, that's former Army Corporal Curlester Williams, a very close friend of his family. He was enlisted in the United States Army post-World War II, assigned to the 24th Infantry Regiment, which is the old Buffalo Soldiers unit, one of the original Buffalo Soldiers unit. He served during the Korean War as a light weapons infantryman and under the 25th Infantry Division. But during his service in the Korean War, he was tragically killed, and the family for quite a while did not know if his remains had been recovered, but throughout some search, and I helped do the search, found that in fact he was interred actually in a cemetery in Hampton, Virginia. But during his time in the Korean War, he fought in the Battle of the Pusan Perimeter, which was a large-scale battle between the United Nations and North Korean forces that lasted from 4th of August to the 18th of September 1950. The Pusan Perimeter, as it was aptly named, was a 140-mile defensive line that was formed around the southeastern tip of the Korean Peninsula. It was widely known as one of the first major engagements of the Korean War. The unique thing about that, and if you can see this book, this is one book I had to study years ago, Black Soldier, White Army. I don't know if you can see it here. It details the history of the 24th Infantry Regiment from its formation, participation in the campaigns down in Cuba, throughout its history in World War II, and then of course the Korean War. But during that engagement between the North Korean Army and the UN forces, a total of 140,000 UN troops, they pushed the UN forces down to the southern peninsula and almost really just had them completely surrounded. With the pitched battles back and forth, the North Korean Army numbered 98,000 men. It was just a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths. One thing about the North Koreans, that they would capture the soldiers and they would execute them. And it's just one of the atrocities that just occurred, and it was just terrible. And here, hopefully this summer, I'll actually be able to give a little historical vignette to the family. That's what we've been waiting on. We were going to plan to do it, but then COVID came about and we had to postpone it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, Ira,
with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Mm-hmm.
Ira, that will be phenomenal for the family. I'm sorry, Coach, I'll let you go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's great information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that'll mean a lot to the family itself. And with that, I'm going to introduce another person here, Mr. Don MacCuish. Well, first, let me back up. Ira and I, for those that don't know, served in Fort Riley, Kansas, 1st Sustainment Brigade under the 1st Infantry Division, Go Big Red 1. Now I'm going to move on to Don MacCuish, who we both served over in Germany together. And he was a battalion commander while I was a sister battalion as a sergeant major over in the sister battalion. And I'm going to throw up a picture of him here and let him talk about it. It's a little less serious, I'll say that. So here we go.
Yes. Wow. The reason I wanted to share this picture was because, well, one, this is the first time I'm on here. And when Ian asked me, he mentioned one of the things that they do is they show these pictures at the beginning of the broadcast. And I was trying to think, what can I do? Do I send him a picture that somehow relates to the topics? But I decided to send a picture that relates to Ian and me. And this picture was probably taken the year that I met Ian. And like he said, we were in sister battalions together. And so, you know, we hit it off as soon as I met him, but we were separated geographically by probably about an hour to an hour and a half drive. So we would see each other on occasion. And one of those occasions that would generally bring us together are some formal events. I think this, and so that's why I'm dressed in the more formal uniform. I think this is actually a Christmas ball. Yeah. I can't recall exactly, but Ian was there with his commander, Michelle Letcher. And like you said, you know, I was in the sister battalion of theirs. Their battalion liked to carry around those silly hammers and use them as like recognition, or Sergeant Major had one, and so did the commander. And their commander just really wanted me to take a picture with their trophy or mascot or whatever you would call it. And so I'm like, well, what kind of picture do I give them holding their mascot? And that's what I came up with. So thanks for having me.
No problem, Don. And so we talked a little bit about this. Is I was moving to Germany, and they were really trying to move me down there where Don was at, to be honest, because his sergeant major had retired, and the unit I was going to, they kind of liked their sergeant major at the time and everything, although that's not how the Army works. You don't get to keep who you like. You got to move on when it's time to move on and such. And but we always had a good time and good rivalry, and it was always good to see each other over there. And normally at that level, leaders, they'll poke fun at each other, but they always show mutual respect, as we always did, and had great admiration for you and your unit, sir. So, Coach, so this is our two people today. So I'll throw it over to you, my friend.
Man, I'm excited about this. This is a topic that the day and age that we live in, this is something that has become more and more prevalent in our conversation in the media. I don't know really the reason that it has become more, I say now, than it was even 10 or 15 years ago, but it seems to be something that has been more of a discussion. So the reason that I'm really excited about this is, as a person that is a history teacher and studied not only slavery here in America, but also slavery around the world, which a lot of people don't know, that there's estimated over 40 million slaves still today in the world. I mean, so it's not like it's, you know, the slavery that we talk about in the past here in America. Yes, it's a horrible thing, and the effects of it, but also it's still something that's going on worldwide right now, and that's just atrocious. So the way that we have the question this week, which I absolutely love it, is, and I'm going to ask Ira first, is, will we ever, being the United States, will we ever get out of the shadow of slavery in America? So I know talk about the worldwide thing, but let's just focus now first on this. Are we ever going to get out of that shadow? We'll start it with that, and I have a couple of questions to follow up later.
Well, Coach, I sure do hope that we do get out of that mindset of slavery here in America. One thing for sure is that our nation, we cannot evolve to become better until the old societal ideologies, the norms and attitudes, and the institutions and the organizations change. Those things are important. Every nation, like you had mentioned earlier, that every nation, every society has a dark history. What is history? History are those things that either a nation or a people either want to remember or want to forget. Our history isn't any different from any other country, any other society in human history. Wars, economic inequalities, enslavement, corruption, social strife, lack of education, racism, etc. All of those things, they plague America, as they have done to the countries in Asia, in Europe, Africa, Australia, and all the Americas. It's an open sore. It's a festering wound that America can't seem to let heal. So it's up to the individual. When I say up to the individual, for me, for instance, I was never a slave. You don't owe me nothing being a white person. No white person alive today owe me anything. When I was born in America in 1965, I won the lottery. I could have been born in any other country. I could have been subject to being a slave today in any other country of the 40 million people worldwide who are still enslaved. I'm very blessed and thankful that I am an American, where I am free. But the thing that surrounds us is that, one, people are afraid of having a discourse that entails the ugly details of the past slavery and the long enduring aftermath that resulted from the dark period in our history. Some people, they desire to turn a blind eye to the past, while yet others, they look forward to the present and the future to find solutions as such. I think that our founding fathers of this nation knew that our nation could not, they knew and they understood that our nation could not exist in perpetuity as a slave holding nation. And as such, when they wrote the Constitution of the United States of America, they wrote it not for themselves at the time, but for the future prodigy of America. They knew that at some point we had to go back and they had to answer that question. Well, it resulted in the Civil War, obviously. Could have had it earlier, could have had it later. We could have been fighting that Civil War today, who knows? But as it stands, it's time for us to, we can never forget about it. We don't necessarily need to rewrite history. We need to understand the ugliness of slavery, but we need to come together as a nation so we can move on and be better than what our predecessors are and have been.
Yeah, I agree with that. And looking back at the beginning of the country, the founders understood that they had to handle this problem, but they had another problem at the time. They just became independent from Great Britain, and they had to have a government. And what that meant was they had to have all 13 colonies agree to something. And some of those southern colonies were not going to agree, and some of those southern areas were not going to agree at that time. So what they did is they wrote that in, that Committee of Five that wrote that the Declaration of Independence, so knowing that that was going to be something that we're going to deal with. Same thing with the Constitution just 11 years later. We know we're going to have to deal with it. We can't now because we're trying to keep this union together, because if we dissolve, we could be taken back by Great Britain. We could be overrun by France or something like that. But you're right, Ira. They knew going forward that it was something that was going to need to be addressed, and they gave us the blueprint for it. And, you know, before I turn this over to Don, because I want to also say this, when we look at the other nations, when I look on the list of slavery going on in the world right now, the United States is not on that list. And what I mean by that is when we see things like India and Russia and China, there are major slavery going on in these countries still, and they haven't figured out a way to get away from it. The United States at least had this great vision of getting away from it. And yes, we have the effects today, but I do want to give us the clap to say at least we're progressed in the right direction, and we're going to continue going that way. And Don, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize your point there that not only do other countries still have slavery, they're not trying to end those minority groups that they have enslaved, whether it's a religious minority or an ethnic minority. I mean, it's the external pressures on that country that is the only influence to end slavery in some of those countries. I'd tell you, you know, I'm generally optimistic on, you know, our country. I think the majority of us have gotten out of the shadow of slavery the way you described it. But I am disappointed in what I've seen recently, because it looks like we're taking steps backwards. And I think when we put a lens of race on everything we talk about or everything we look about or everything we think about, you see everything through that lens. And so when an issue crops up, when you see something in society that is just not right, if the lens you're looking through that is a lens of race, then you're going to blame it on the cause of that issue, or that failure in society is related to race, and it may very well not be related to race. And I think, and so, you know, Coach, you and I started talking this discussion about what our sons are learning in school right now, or what you're teaching actually, and what my son's going through, and that's the Reconstruction era in society. And I think it's a great example of what to study in history, because the reality is it wasn't a it wasn't conservatives or liberals that caused a failure in that era of our society. It was the influence of politics on what society was trying to accomplish that caused a failure in Reconstruction. It was the fact
Absolutely.
that you had, it was a Democratic Party at the time. You had Southern Democrats that wanted to see failure in reuniting our country. But it wasn't just conservative Democrats in the South. It was the Democrats across the nation, because they chose party and politics over what was best for the country. And that's just one example. Both parties have we could point to examples that both parties have done this. I mean, even Nancy Pelosi holding off the stimulus check until a new party came to power. Well, we didn't need that money 6 months ago, apparently, because it sat on her desk. And then as soon as her party becomes the party in power, they then pass a $1.9 trillion stimulus check. And so I would say the lens of looking at everything through race is a dangerous way to look at things, because you're going to see things that don't exist, but you think exist. And then I think politics, until we can clean up the corruption in politics, we're always going to have politics using race as a leverage or as a tool to control and to maintain power.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Yvette, I'm going to throw a question over you here in a minute, but I want to address one thing on that. We always hear about the Civil Rights Act. I'm talking about with Ira a minute ago about the progression of our country. At least we've progressed in the correct way. We always hear about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and how seminal and how great that was. But in reality, if you'll go back 100 years prior to that, the first Civil Rights Act was in 1866. And that was the radical Republican pushing for the 14th Amendment, because they were terrified. Well, you do know that, the push of that, Johnson actually vetoed that. And they had to come back and straighten it out, because they were terrified that the court at the time was going to overturn it. So the Republicans really pushed and got more people involved to pass the 14th Amendment, which didn't just give citizenship. It actually gave equal protection under the law for blacks at that time. That's 100 years before the big Civil Rights Act that we talk about a lot. So I just want to throw that out there, since Don, we're talking about Reconstruction right now. Vet, I know you love these kind of questions. So the left is always arguing for equality of at the border, just let them in. We want everybody to come here, and we want to take care of them and give them give them the same opportunity as us, of everyone and as Americans. And same thing they do that with, the LGBT, same thing to do that with gay marriage, same thing to do that with different groups of identity that they've chosen to champion for. But when we look at 40 million people around the world that are in slavery still, the majority of that are women and kids. And I don't hear the left, which always wants to champion, equal rights for the less than, the minority, the young kid at the border in a cage, and the woman that can't get the same amount of money. I haven't heard a word ever from any women's group or left group about let's champion and chant for the world to end slavery, when 40 million people plus are slaves to this day.
So, Coach, a couple of things I'll say on that is, the first thing is, when I agree with you wholeheartedly on what you're saying there, and what I see with that is, it leads me to believe that, hey, I just want to champion racial difficulties long enough to get me elected or reelected or things of that nature. So I want to do that every year, even year. I definitely want to do it on national election times, or when it can throw a kick in my opponent's side, because to me it sounds like there's lack of sincerity whatsoever. That's one. So that's deliberate. The second thing is it leads me to believe there's a party that pushes racism pretty hard, that there's a second portion of it, which maybe they're not educated. Just throwing it out there. Ira and I talked a couple of weeks ago about what racism is considered now compared to how when him and I were young, and what we saw in racism as kids, it has changed dramatically, and it would be a culture shock to some people to see how we grew up. And I believe wholeheartedly that there's some people in America that support those certain times a year as pushing racism or inequality or whatever they want to say, and they have no clue about the rest of the world or how the rest of the world was even founded. You know, you think about cultures that we have, and we talked about this, Ira and I did. Two cultures I'll just throw out there is the Vikings and the Russians. They talk loosely about slaves all the dang time. Now, the Vikings, of course, are no longer in existence as a culture, but the Russians, you know, oh, you sacked my border town, you took some slaves, who cares? Was the mentality of it. It's like, it was a border town, I don't even care, you know? And today we have people who preach inequality. And I'll give a great example. Some former NFL quarterback that used to play for the 49ers that preaches inequality, but the very company that sponsors him has people that are child labor and things of that nature, you know? I mean, Jesus. And but he preaches inequality. And then you have that half the darn attire at one time was developed by children or made by children, or what we would consider children in the United States of America. So some form of indentured servant and shaped like that. So
Yeah,
that's just my thoughts on it, Coach, to be honest.
well, I'm going to pass this on to Ira in a minute for him some follow up. But I do want to say this. One of the things that Trump said, and I hate to bring Trump into that slavery argument that we're talking about, was America first, America first. You know, make America great again. They're talking about America first, and he was called a nationalist. You know, too much nationalism. Could it be that a lot of groups are only considering slavery and talking about the effects of slavery 150 years ago that ended here in America today because they're only worried about what's going on in America? Are they not worried about what's going on in the world? Would that be considered some kind of nationalism, that we're just worrying about what's going on 150 years ago in America because we need to use it as an excuse for victimization or whatever it might be? I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not on one side of this argument. But we're only considering talking about what happened in America for 400 years or the 1619, but we're not considering talking about what's going on today still. So, Ira, what's your take on that?
Well, my take is simply this. Slavery has existed since the dawn of man. We had to fight our Civil War to get ourselves out of slavery, but at the same time, our minds are enslaved. Every 2 and every 4 years, those same talking points or arguments are always brought up. Slavery, sexism, racism, race, all of those things. You know, I have this saying, and if you ever seen my Facebook posts, you know, some of the vitriol comments that come back my way, and I'm considered as a racist. Me. But at the same time, I say to a lot of my people, my friends I know, I say, well, damn, I haven't seen Democrats this mad since Abraham Lincoln freed their slaves. You know, and I kind of tick them off a little bit, kind of tweak.
Well, that's a good one right there.
Yeah. But, you know, it's just crazy. But the two reasons that I'm just looking at here, I want to read from a Dr. Michael Simanga. The two reasons why we really don't talk about slavery. One, the first is the subject. It makes us have to face our ugly history against the beauty of the American backdrop. Two, it's going to force us to commit to a structural change in this nation. Simple that. Our nation is probably not ready to address this structural change, the old status quo. The Democrats, for me, and through my knowledge of history, has never done anything good, especially in the arena of racism in America. You mentioned the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and then again in 1964. It was the Republicans who pushed the agenda to get equal rights, to get all the other rights that I am enjoying today. It wasn't any Democrats that was doing this. And when you bring it up to the forefront, we talk about President Trump and his America's First agenda, one of which I support. It's okay to be nationalistic, because when you have pride in yourself and you take care of yourself first and foremost, when you get those problems fixed, you can kind of reach out and fix other world's problems, but assist them into solving their own problems. We, as America, we can't fix everybody's problem. Every country is unique, has its own unique problems. America first.
Don, I'm going to bring this to you, but one of the things I was thinking about earlier in the day, and I forgot about to now, but Ira made me think about it, was where does this foundation come up, where it comes back up, like he said, every 2 to 4 years, using election time, of course. But now, why is it a little bit seem to be more of a conversation than it was when I was younger? I'm 50 now, so I didn't hear much about slavery outside of a classroom when I was in high school and college. But I think the cancel culture that we're living in the last 6 to 8 years, it's not like, I mean, I hate to say that they're just looking for things, because I'm not saying slavery is not a bad thing. Slavery is a huge bad thing. But I'm saying because of the cancel culture that we live in, I think that has been something that has brought it to the top even more, is that, we need to finally address this issue. So Don, I mean, what do you think about not only what Ira said, but also, kind of where this cancel culture has brought this up to a forefront of, let's cancel these statues, let's cancel this history, let's cancel this white people. They can't have an opinion on it at all because, only we can, because we are a certain color.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you both. There's a lot to unpack in there, obviously. But I think it really comes down to, what do we want to identify ourselves as? And that's kind of where nationalism comes in, is that the argument behind that is we identify ourselves as Americans first. And then those other things are just, that's supplementary to me being an American. Well, when we decide to push that aside and now we want to use identity, use some other thing to identify us, whether it be race or politics, then you're already starting at a place where you're disuniting each other. If I identify myself as a white man, then I only see things as a white man. And if you disagree with that perspective, then you're wrong and I'm right. It's totally different than nationalism. And things like critical race theory bring that to the forefront, where now, it goes back to everything we see is through the lens of race. And if you don't see it from my perspective, then you are wrong and I am right. And one of the outputs of that is cancel culture, because we think we're right about everything because of the lenses we're looking at things through and how we choose to identify ourselves.
Yeah, Vet. And so I want you to tackle this, Vet. One of the things that I looked up was the definition while he was speaking of nationalism. It's become a dirty word because of Hitler. Let's just be honest. People use that word. That means that you're some kind of diabolical, madman. But the actual definition of nationalism isn't a bad thing. It actually is the identification of one's own nation and support for its interest, especially to the inclusion or detriment of the interest of any other nation. So pretty much it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to actually think of yourself first. It's like taking care of your family first. I can't help you and give you loan money if I can't even take care of my own family. I have to take care of my own family first.
Well, Coach, so first of all, I'm going to address the Hitler part, and then I'm going to get into nationalism. So the problem is a lot of people confuse Hitler or analogy with being the testament. At the end of the day, there was a time and period that the Nazi Party was in charge and Hitler was in charge. Does that mean all Germans were bad? Anybody that loved their country was bad? No. That means the leader was bad. But there's a law that people use that's called the Godwin's law that people use when they refer to Hitler to try to end a conversation. And that's what's happened with the cancel culture as of recently, is they've tried to end the conversation by using this is nationalism, associating it with Hitler. And at the end of the day, if you go ask a person from Britain, they're proud to be British. When I went to Liberia, people from Liberia were proud to be from Liberia. Okay. What is wrong with people from America being proud to be American? I can go be boisterous about this and go, hey, 2-time world champs. That's us. Or I can also say, you know what? I love my upbringing. I've been raised right here. I got a lot of freedoms that other countries don't. So what is wrong with that? The problem is, it is kind of what you said with the cancel culture. If you don't agree with me, I have to hate you. I have to hate you. So if you're a flag waving person because you love your country, I have to hate you. You know, you and I both went to a Trump rally, and this ain't to talk about Trump, but we both went to a Trump boat rally. Everybody there at that Trump boat rally would have took their shirt off their back for no matter who it was out there. Only thing they wanted you to know was they were American and they supported Trump. If somebody would have come out there and say, I disagree with you, they would have argued a little bit, but they would have helped their fellow man out. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're supposed to do as humans, in my mind. But I'm going to throw a bad term at it, but we bastardized the term nationalism. What's crazy is our country, because it's been such a big melting pot, is one of the few countries that has always had trouble having a nationalism of our country, whereas other countries have it naturally by how they were, their origin of their country, or through their culture, they've had it naturally. Well, we've become a melting pot. People try to chip away at it. So I'll just leave it at that right there, Coach.
Go ahead, Ira.
Well, one of the things, going off of what Ian said, and like they said, I'm going to piggyback off you. Remember that. But I never refer to myself as an African American. I never. I think it's offensive, and I just don't. That term came to light during the Jesse Jackson period when he popularized African American. Okay. Now, I have a friend. She's Nigerian. She's a retired CW4 in the Army, a chief warrant officer, and she's originally from Nigeria, born there, grew up in New York. She never refers to herself as an African American. And when one of the first, and she taught me this lesson years ago. First time I had mentioned that, she says, Ira, we have a term for you Americans, you Black Americans in Nigeria. And it's actually an insult the way it is when you say you're not African, you are an American, you're just a Black guy in America. It's really what you're trying to tell me in the nicest way. I said, well, my feelings were hurt, tell me. But the term, the hyphenated terms, we have got to get rid of that. I am a nationalist. I am an American. I love this country. And to divide us, you put a little hash mark in that little dash mark. That's one of the things that we have got to cancel. I like to cancel the cancel culture every opportunity I have.
Hey, and Ira, and before I kick this back to Don, I work in a prison and I teach, government economics law in prison. I have the majority of my prisoners, about a little over 50% are Hispanics. And every single one of them are either from Mexico or Honduras, in that area, it seems like. And not one time did they ever, when we've had this conversation, do they ever want to be called Mexican American? They don't even know why we say Honduran American. They would never say that. And then the Black people in the class, they really would rather be called Black. But I only had one that even said, look, why are we called Africans when my parents are not even anywhere from Africa? They've never even been to Africa, but then I'm associated with that. And one of the Black guys said this. He said it like this: it's because we want to associate with something different than American by itself, because for some reason, to some people, being American is not enough. And that really hurt my feelings. But why would you attach African American or Mexican American, or you wouldn't? I mean, my people are from, I guess, Germany. So I'm a German American, even though no one in the last 3 generations even been to Germany. What do you think about it, Don?
Yeah, I'm a Scottish American, but I did make a trip there, and it was a beautiful country. But I don't identify myself as Scottish. I mean, I do have some cufflinks and a flag, but I think getting back to just one more thing on the nationalism thing, I do think it's uniquely different in America on what nationalism means to people. I think an American that looks at themselves as a nationalist, they look at it from the idea of what America can be and the idea of what America provides, not the country itself, but the idea behind the purpose of our existence in the country. And so I think even that makes it uniquely different than, describing nationalism somewhere else in the world.
Don, I'm also from Scotland County in North Carolina. Bagpipes, kilts, the whole 9 yards.
Hey, Vet, I hope that I can quote this. I was writing this down so I can say this correctly, and I think I would like for you to unpack this. I'm sitting here thinking, why do we use these terms? And I know that I believe it was Ira that said that Jesse Jackson had kind of brought this up, which Jesse Jackson brings a lot of things up because he needs that to have a job. But somehow we are, this is what I've thought of, and I don't know if it's true or not. So, and I'm not saying this is true. This is what I felt. Somehow I believe we're so embarrassed at what happened with our original sin that we allow other people to be able to put those labels out there without questioning it, because we don't want to question, because we're going to feel like we're going to be called racist or we're going to be called something, when as an American, we should say, wait a minute, stop that crap. Quit putting a label out in front of you with a hyphen. You're a damn American, and I'm an American. And yeah, I'm pissed off that happened with slavery too, but quit putting an African or a Mexican or an Irish in front of it. You live here, you're an American. Why is that a bad thing, or should it be a bad thing?
So I'll relate to this through my in-laws here, who my in-laws are not American, they're German. But when you talk about the Holocaust, that's taboo. You don't say that. You don't talk about it at all. They're embarrassed, and it's embarrassed to have national pride because of it. Is you can have pride. Two things Germans have a lot of pride about. Well, three things: being able to speak the language of Germany, of Deutschland, of Deutsch, beer in the Oktoberfest, and your soccer team. But you don't have national pride much in a lot of Germany other than those three things really right there, unless you get around some military people, okay? But those three things you can have national pride on, but the rest you cannot. And some of that, when I'm around my in-laws, it is very evident. As soon as you show, like I'll watch a German movie, she'll go, well, y'all had the slavery back then, and she'll cuss at me in German and walk away, and I'm like, I'm watching this for the education benefit. I'm not looking down at you. But back to what you're saying is we have a bad history that is not pretty. It demoralized, and that's even a nice word. It tortured people. It ruined families. It ruined ways of life. It destroyed a composite way of life completely in generations in this country because of it. But like Ira said, I had nothing to do with that at all.
Well, and before I turn this to Ira, and I do want to ask this question to Ira, Vet, because I don't think we can talk about the legacy of slavery and where we progress from if we don't talk about the R word, reparations. And I've not been someone that's really for a reparation. I understand where it comes from. I understand the argument very well. I've listened to a lot of debates over the argument, and I would love to even discuss it more, even on here, maybe on a podcast. But Ira, I do want to bring this to you first, and what your personal feeling is. And this is a personal feeling. Maybe you can give us your personal feeling, and then also maybe a feeling of other people that you might know that might be for it or against it.
Reparations. I'm personally against it. How do we pay for it in the first place? How do we identify those who would be entitled to reparations? Okay, and who can we blame for that? Again, no one alive today owned slaves or were a slave 156 plus years ago. Okay, you ever heard that term 40 acres and a mule? 40 acres and a mule. Well, we would tend to think that, 40 acres and a mule, what is that? Is that going to right the wrong? No. We can talk about generational wealth. We can talk about the lack of diversity in education. We can talk about even the lack of diversity in politics. But we have had a Black president. We've got a current female vice president who's Black and, of course, female. We have achieved the pinnacle of degrees, being doctors and lawyers and scientists and such. Have had astronauts, to include the Secretary of Defense. So many major milestones have been achieved by Black people here in America. But it takes that village, what we call, everybody pulling together regardless of whatever color you are, you don't owe me nothing. We have got to get out of the mindset. But I think the problem of entitlement is being pushed by a political agenda. That agenda is to continue to divide, because there are some people, plenty of them, who are just ignorant to every fact that, hey, I can live off the belly of the government. They provide me a living with everything. I can take that person's property and the money, and that will make it right. To me, that's robbery by political means. Reparations are wrong, but I do have some friends and associates and others that I know who believe that reparations would be the thing that could fix the issue of past slavery in America. And we can get into a heated debate every time that subject come up. And well, I get just tore down a lot, but I fight a good fight, and eventually we solve nothing talking about the advantages of reparations. It's just nothing. I would hope that the subject go away, but it'll pop up every 2 years, every 4 years.
Well, and I guess it depends on what our goal is as a country. If we're a goal of our country to finally just stop the political divide or the racial divide or divide that happened because of slavery, do you think that, and I'm going to ask this to Don first, and then I want the vet to also answer it too. Do you think that reparations would divide us even more? Because I do believe, look at myself, and I hate to say it this way, but I'm just going to say it the way I want to say it. I'm a white guy that's 50 years old. Of course, I've never owned a slave. My parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, I know never owned a slave. We're $30 trillion in debt as a nation. Ira brought up, where are you going to get the money for it? So are you going to start taking it out of every white person's check? Or are you going to start taking it out of people's checks that are just anyone that's not considered African-American? You're going to take it out of our check. You're going to take it out of state budget. You're going to take it out of property tax. Yes, you have to look at it as, where is it going to come from? And is it going to make us a better country, or is it going to divide us even more? Because it's then going to have a whole lot of people going, wait a minute, you're taking money from me for something I didn't even do. It's like I'm paying for a crime, but I didn't commit. So Don, before he goes to the vet, what is your take on something like, you think it's divide us or make it, well, it finally fixed it?
I mean, I think, of course, it's going to divide us, because I think the whole idea is, I mean, it's ridiculous in my mind. You know, another thing that separates us from these other countries is we liberated ourselves from slavery. We fought ourselves to end that. And so although we should be embarrassed about that period of our history, we took it upon ourselves as a nation to fix it. And yeah, we're not perfect, but yeah, we spend $4 trillion a year on everything from Social Security to defense to paying down the debt. $4 trillion a year. It's a little more than that, but we only bring in $3 trillion a year. So every year we're borrowing $1 trillion. And oh, this doesn't even include COVID, which, you know, we just passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus check. We bring in $3 trillion a year. We just borrowed another $2 trillion from China to pay for COVID relief. So yeah, there is no money for reparations. I mean, unless it's another thing we're going to pass on to our children. And I would imagine our children would be pretty upset that we took more money out of their pockets for, you know, the white 40, 50-year-olds to pay down their guilt to black 40 and 50-year-olds. I think the whole idea is just, I mean, ridiculous is the word. I can't think of another word.
And Vet, the way I want to frame this to you, Vet, is if there was somehow some reparation passed. I do hear, and one of the people that's online right now brought up the fact that some of the counties in California are kind of starting to do that, where there's some reparations paid. But one of the ways that I want to look at this is, if you start thinking about reparations as a whole nation, is it ever going to be enough? What would be enough for people like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, the left media, MSNBC, the NAACP, or whoever, for it to go, you know, finally y'all have paid enough and we can move on? Do you ever think there would be a figure that they could go, that's enough?
Coach, I truly don't. And I think whatever the figure will be, it'll be like, that's it. Kind of like, when we had issue up in Minneapolis. What do you mean he's only going to get third-degree murder? Well, you got to follow the law. I'm sorry that whatever fits in the law it's kind of how you got to go. It's just how the law is written. If you don't want to follow the law, we go be something else besides the country. I don't know, but the same thing with this right here is it'll never be enough because somebody will feel, well, I didn't get enough. And then you have the other thing is like I'm married to a first-time immigrant. Just so does my wife pay taxes for that? She definitely had nothing to do with it. Hell, she was in Germany. Like that. Or the question is the people that we're paying, the people who want reparations, are they paying the taxes too? I mean, I'm seeing the Supreme Court going, cha-ping, you can't do that, all over this.
Yeah, 14th Amendment issue, equal protection right there.
Yeah, and I just see the Supreme Court slapping the bejesus out of this all along while we ran political campaigns on vote for us. We'll take care of you with reparations. Come to California. We got you. In another 2 years, it's going to be like, can't do that.
Well, you see, Ian, there you have it. The Supreme Court, it probably will never even make it to a Supreme Court anywhere. Nowhere. It's just an issue that's brought up just to continue dividing us among those lines, to keep the conversation going, knowing that it's not going to go anyplace. It's just there as cannon fodder just to keep the masses angry at one another.
I agree. It's kind of like when you're downrange, the people who don't do a lot sit around the smoke fire pit every day, and the story gets bigger and bigger. And right now we have a political party that's running that smoke fire pit, of people that are really not doing nothing, but they're trying to build that steam up to get everybody agitated. Go ahead.
Well, what I would like to do is this and say it this way, and I have one final question I'd like to throw out. What Don said was one of the best things that I've heard in a while. We liberated ourselves. We need to champion that. That needs to be on a t-shirt. That needs to be on a screen somewhere. That needs to be on a flag. We liberated ourselves. It didn't take another country come in here to make us stop something. We decided that it was so bad that we stopped it ourselves. And that's a big, big thing. Go ahead.
Don, we will be having that on the Coach and the Vet shopping bag page on a shirt soon. We only get $4. You'll get $1 out of the $4. No, I'm just joking.
Hey, I will want to say this though. I won't think I'd want to end this without trying to give, and I hope I hope everybody has enough time where they can give their opinion on what they believe would put us forward, even progress us even further than we've gone with the racial issues that we have that starts with the slavery. And I would like to say this. I think that if I quit calling myself a white man and I quit calling you a black man and we quit calling this guy a brown guy and we just are Americans that want to take care of each other, love each other, help each other out, give everybody the same equal opportunity, no matter if you're male, female, black or white, that's where we have to go. And when you identity politics things, you're going to create more division that's needed. And you're going to have to then have people pick a team. So that's the thing is they're wanting to do is if you have to pick a team or you're looked at a certain way, when in reality, the team that we play for should be the United States of America. So let's go, Don. Tell me what you think would push us forward, and then Ira, and then I'll let the vet wrap it up.
Well, I have a simple mind. I think the way to solve the problems in this country is to get rid of our Congress and get rid of a corrupt media. If you get rid of those two things, I think we'd be great as a society. And you see it in the Midwest, where I'm living right now. Day to day in the Midwest, folks are just worried about taking care of themselves, taking care of their neighbor, and taking care of their community. And it doesn't matter who my neighbor is or who's in my community. If we're all working towards the same goals, we all see eye to eye. Yeah, we have differences, but we can love each other through those differences. I tell you, the problems in this country are a corrupt media and a corrupt Congress.
Ira, give us your points on this.
All excellent points from Don. For sure, we have to rethink those politicians that we put into office. We have got to hold them accountable, but we got to get ourselves embedded with conservative ideas and conservative values at the community, local, and state levels. In the school, I don't care if you are a member of the school board or not, get in there, take over, start to push the conservative agenda. We got to If you believe in God, great, I do. We got to put a moral compass and get ourselves back on azimuth. Right now, we have lost that moral compass because we all helter-skelter at one another. We're at each other's throats. But we have got to love our neighbor. That's what my Bible teaches me, to love thy neighbor, love thyself. But at the same time, we've got to just simply get ourselves on a straight and narrow, love one another, get rid of those those crooked politicians, and sometimes just push back away from that crooked news media, because there's so much information, misinformation, and disinformation, it confuses the masses.
Amen. Vet, give us your final thoughts on this, and I think this has been a very good podcast, because it gives different perspectives and different things of what we think about with the issue of, where do we go now with the issues of slavery. But the Vet, your opinion on this means so much to me, and I really want you to finish this out so we can close out here.
So, Coach, first of all, I think this has been a great podcast overall. It's been good to have Don and our own, and both bring a wealth of knowledge and maturity to this. And it's a subject that, as you and I have talked about this subject, and we said we want to do this one day, but we got to have the right mix to do this with and the right intellect to do this with. And will we ever get out of the shadow of slavery? I don't believe it'll be in my time, but I would sure like for it to be in my kids' time. That's a fact there. And I think I'd like to work on that. One thing I'll throw out there, as of recently, you and I come from a region of the country, Coach, that we're called Neanderthals, I guess, and down here, our neighbors like to call us fellow Texans, in which we appreciate that and respect that. But most importantly, I'm just proud to be a damn American. And I just wish half the country had as much respect for the flag as half the people down here do. And that's not knocking anybody else's state, but there's a lot of people that love this country down here. And I just like to be called American. And what's kind of ironic is every place that I put my foot on the ground across this globe has respected the fact of who I am. And I know Don and I know Ira has felt the same way. People are like, how do I become like you? What do you mean? How do I get to America and be American? The problem is we have lived a pampered society for a long time. And I agree with Don about our congressional leaders and our media. And I agree with Ira also that we got to hold them accountable. But we've lived a pampered society, as you and I have discussed, Coach, that we don't appreciate what we have been given to us. And people who cry racism in order to get their political agenda across have long forgotten what racism was just when you and I were kids, Ira, and you and I, Don, and you and I, Coach, was, because it was vastly different then. And does that don't mean we don't need to do better? We sure the hell do. But this is a damn great country. Anyway, and I'll throw it over to you, Coach.
Well, one of the things I want to say, and I've said this before on here before, there's nobody in our country swimming oceans, skipping across rivers, and running across deserts to get to other countries. They're all trying to come to the great United States of America. And the reason for that is we have a great, here's on my arm, we have a great Constitution. And we the people, it's the people, don't say we the African American or we the Chinese American or we the whatever title. It says the people, and all the people that are here, that was born here or come here, you're all protected in the same rights. That's a big thing. And like you're right, I haven't been around the world, but anyone I've ever met in prison or in a classroom or anywhere that's not from here, they're like, you have no idea what it is to live in another place, because most people there want to be here. And it's sad that our younger generation and even some of our generation feel like they're embarrassed to be here, and they don't want to be here, and they talk crap about the United States of America. And you know what? It sickens me and pisses me off when I hear it. And you're right, they're entitled. And Ira, I think, used that word entitled. That is one of the most unbelievable things that I've seen in the last 10 to 15 years is entitlement, that we believe we're entitled to something. And I hope going forward that something's going to change, some big revolution, maybe we'll have not just a revolution of military, but we'll have a revolution of the heart, something that'll just change that we just can't even stop.
Well, so Coach, we're about to close up here, man. It's time to go. We've done it all one subject this time for a whole hour, and we've had a great cast. So I think
we
it's
could
time
do
to
2 hours.
We need to do it, and we definitely want these guys back on. So I'm going to throw it out there from the coach
and to the vet.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.